morning, everyone. Today we start with a super interesting session called Creating Peace and Prosperity via Creativity and Culture, something our next two speakers have been doing for a while. Deepakn is one of the first people who actually put Assam on the map of India, forget the map of the world. She is a young entrepreneur who not only started creating a cultural link using cruise tourism, using ground tourism, using multiple interregional tourism way before the names, way before these names became common. And then she went on to take up after her favorite passion. As you can see in her stylish manner, she is also a creative entrepreneur who has been supporting the regional silk makers. And she will give us a deep insight into what her journey has been and how she has used creativity, not just for livelihood generation, but also for creating peace, prosperity, and purpose. Ramesh has done something which I never thought was possible. When I first met Ramesh, I was a little skeptical. How is he going to pull off? But I knew one thing, he had the passion. And I've seen it play out in the next few years. Ramesh has brought the impossible, the IDC or the Delphic Games to India. Now, Ramesh is going to do the bifurcation between what is the International Delphic Games and how the Indian Delphic Games are going to play out. Well, just to start with, Delphic Games are actually the sister of the Olympic Games. So just like we've had the ancient sports Olympiad and then we've had the maths Olympiad, now welcome to India, and what other place than India for the cultural Olympiads. Slowly and surely, he's been introducing all his colleagues, all people who are like-minded and fond of culture, into this concept called the Cultural Olympiad, and with great success indeed. So take it away from here, Janabi and Ramesh. We're going to start with a short video where you can actually see the work of the Delphic Games and Janabi's work, and then we will start talking to them. Please, Yash, can you play the Delphic Games video that Ramesh has just provided us? I'm sorry, there's a bit of a lag in the technology. Just please bear with us.
In ancient times, the Greek city of Delphi was the spiritual center of the Mediterranean world for about 1,000 years. But it was the Delphic Games that took place in that city that have proved values for modern times. The International Delphic Council, founded 1994 as a non-profit, non-governmental organization, is responsible for both the International Delphic Games and the Junior Delphic Games. The games gather the world's best talented artists in 6 Delphic art categories, a global stage to encounter arts and cultures.
Delphic Games is going now to be the Olympics or the competition for the arts or of the spirit.
Professor Bautista brought the 3rd Junior Delphic Games 2007 to Baguio City, the capital of the Philippines.
The name of Delphi, it for us is not only historical name, not only one strict point on the map, but some cultural signal.
The Delphic Games of the modern era is based on 3 key elements: competitions, presentation, and exhibitions. The best artists are honored with Delphic awards such as Medal Award, Gold, Silver, and Bronze incomparable art disciplines, Lyra Award for exceptional individual artistic performances within a larger presentation, and Laurel Award for outstanding and incomparable artistic compositions. The second Delphic Games 2005 were held in Kuching, Malaysia, under the motto Revitalizing of Endangered Traditions. It became impressive clear that in a globalized world, the communication among different cultures is possible and even more so necessary than ever.
Was mich an dieser Idee so begeistert,
What excites me the most about this idea is the communication and unification among all people through spiritual disciplines. I'm a musician, conductor, and I believe that especially music is an international language with points direct into the heart of people. At the second Junior Delphic Games 2003 in Düsseldorf, Germany, the participants called for Delphic peace, honoring the essence of ancient Delphic games. The juniors confessed their will to preserve cultural diversity and traditions, as well as to create new contemporary expressions.
I think it is time. It is a very time for this kind of idea.
das Zusammentreffen
The gathering of people through culture is an excellent approach. The first Delphic Games 2000 took place in Moscow, Russia, where artists competed in different art disciplines. The variety of art forms, the level of artistic skills, and the unique creativity of the participants was amazing. It was a festival of joy, expressing the diversity of culture and exchange of cultural heritage. We all are transient. Mankind remains, nations are remaining. What could be more beautiful as to bring something alive for future generations? The old Greeks already did, more than 2,000 years ago. Tbilisi, Georgia, hosted the first Junior Delphic Games 1997, a historic moment. The past games were held under the auspices of international organizations such as the Council of Europe, UNESCO, ASEAN, etc.
Each movement needs initiators. And we should never forget what we are doing should not so much benefit us as our children, grandchildren, future generations.
The Delphic Games, twin sister of the Olympic Games, became alive.
And right from now, we have started making history for the world as a cultural group. And culture has a lot to offer to the world.
The third Delphic Games 2009 will be held in Jeju, Korea.
Truly inspiring, really, really inspiring. And who would have thought we had a cultural Olympics? Can you please tell us your journey, Rameshji, in finding this cultural Olympic gem and what inspired you to bring it to India? And what is the urgency to have it in India?
Well, thank you for inviting me to the summit. Now, to begin with, I would tell you that divine providence is something that is predestined. And if somebody has thought through this idea, it is, Mr. Christian B. Kirsch, who's a founding, Secretary General and now incumbent president. He thought through this during a visit to Greece, where he had a moment of truth. So when he came to know about the ancient Delphic games and the impact that it had in the ancient world, he went there and he spent some time on Mount Parnassus, which is where the Greek city of Delphi is located. Of course, now it's a UNESCO cultural heritage site. And then there are mountains higher than that. And then he went there. There's a vortex that you find there. And he sat there and thought through, and he realized that today, in today's world of conflicts, and today's world of haves and have-nots and me's and me too's, what you need today is something that can bind the universe, human beings, and that is art and that is culture. Because your cultural identities define who you are, and the expressions that manifest out of those cultural identities are the arts that you practice. So while every human being has similar emotions, it is the expressions that every human being has is directly identified with their culture, where they come from, and what they believe in. And therefore, let me give this credit to Mr. Christian Kirsch, who founded this. And I happened to meet him during a chance, visit of his to India in one of the Indian cities. And we just happened to meet, there just by divine providence. Maybe that was meant to be. So as you know that, you connect the dots. So maybe there was an intention that India, and he always believed that India was a great cosmos by itself, but every Indian state is like a country by itself, So you have 36 of our provinces and states here in India. And therefore we had a conversation and something about us clicked with each other. And then he asked me if I could possibly lead the show here in India and try and put together something. So we made some valiant efforts to try and get the Indian, diaspora outside and within India together. And of course, it has taken us some time, but I must happily tell you that India is the first country in the world in the Delphic system to adopt the regional, method, which means a country or a nation which has got diverse cultures and arts like India. There are many countries in the world which have a similar kind of a cultural ecosystem, cannot be represented by a handful of people at the national level. So therefore, one needed to go down to the last mile. And the idea of introducing regional councils happened in India. And therefore, today I can happily tell you that we have every reason, like the way the global Delphic Games are organized. Global Delphic Games are basically all the countries coming together and displaying their arts and cultures. We are doing something similar in India, which is called the National Delphic Games. And this is the beginning of the, let's say, a very large Delphic movement that happens in India. However, the story is much longer because the movement started in India in 2002. And as you would possibly would have seen from the video, it was an older video. So therefore, you would have seen 3 games in those videos. But in reality, we've gone through 7 Delphic Games globally. And, as we are a League of Nations, just like the UNO is a League of Nations, the International Delphic Council is a League of Nations, which has a history behind it, a beautiful history behind it, of how 12 tribes came together to make peace. And these 12 tribes then became a League of Neighbors. The same concept, the same context carries on even today. And in this context, we are, creating nations, which then come together as one large international body. But within those nations, we are identifying unique cultures, which can then gather together and then present it as one nation. So I think that's where the beginning of the journey in India is. And my role is basically that of a custodian of the International Delphic Council, at the International Delphic Council as a Secretary General, and also as the initiator of the Indian Delphic Movement that we've started, which even Jahanavi ji is proudly a part of, representing 8 regions together.
Pardon me. I had the dogs barking in background, so I had to kind of mute. But how did you start, joining this whole movement? Now, you've always been a creator, cultural expert yourself. What made you want to join this movement with Rameshji? What about the IDC is important for the northeastern states, and how have you brought them all together and are working towards a collated cultural and IDC uh, chapter?
Is that addressed to me or to Ramesh? I think Ramesh.
To you, Janabi.
Me, okay. Sorry. Well, thanks very much, Sonia. You know, it was, we were telling you, since when we had met years ago, it was on a different level, the Sherry Blair Mentoring Forum. When I met Ramesh in 2021, what the ideas that he had for our region, you know, so resonated with what we would like to do. You know, in all our years in tourism and all my years in the handloom sector, we've been celebrating creativity and culture on a day-to-day basis. But what was exciting was to get this opportunity to be able to promote it to the world through the Delphic medium, and the privilege of being the regional convener for the 8 states, for trying to mesh all our states together. Each 8 states are so distinct in their own characteristics, in their own regions, their languages, their dialects, their customs. You know, India is like a continent. We are each so different, especially in the Northeast. And it was very exciting to bring it all under the IDC platform and under the Delphic Council of India. And that is how I'm here today. And this is piece, I mean, the creativity and culture is the only way that will help all our communities find that common language through Delphic. You have to unmute yourself, Sonia.
Apologies. As this goes for both of you all, as someone who's hosting IDC, someone who's creating the IDC chapters, what is your vision for this? What is your vision for the Indian chapter of the Northeast? This goes to Ramesh and then to Janabi.
Well, the idea is to reach out to unique cultures, and unique cultures reaching out to unique cultures. And the only way that's possible is that you have an aggregation point or a meeting point, or you have something like a platform that people can. So we call ourselves a common floor. The ancient Delphic games was the only recorded and known common floor in the world where the cultures met together, and therefore, the arts happened. And it was always the principle that arts and education, which actually drives culture, is something that's intermixed with each other. And I felt, that when we talk about India, Northeast of India has a absolutely great potential because of a few reasons. The first reason being that one of the most literate, regions in the country, especially because, the Queen's language, for some reason, for centuries or maybe 1.5 centuries or 2 centuries, has been, naturally imbibed there. And that actually makes you globally very competitive. That's number one. Number two is that you have so many different art forms within those 8 states. Each state, every maybe 50 kilometers, even within a state and outside of the state, cultures change, dialects change, everything changes. And that's true for India as such, as a whole. But for Northeast, that is particularly true because it has absolutely unique cultures. And there are both the plains and there are the mountains. And both the cultures are very different. And therefore, there's a beautiful, the fabric of the overall social fabric that you have is, I would say, very intricate, very delicate, something that needs to be conserved, protected, preserved. And you also need to encourage people not to get weaned away by the technology that makes things that you used to make out of your hands. And therefore, it was necessary to allow people to use all their senses and to survive and not let the artificial intelligence or machines doing it, because that's the end of human interaction. So I think Northeast for me was a classic region or a classic case study of how can we unite 8 different distinct states. And people think Northeast is one, but Northeast is not one. Northeast is 8 different distinct states, 7 sisters, 1 young brother. And this is a beautiful, kind of a family that you have where everybody is different and yet all of them want to be one. So when I approached Northeast, and one of the rarest cases that you could find in the world is that every single state we spoke to, of course, Janabi ji was the touch point there, and everybody said that we would like to have one council instead of having 8 councils. And that actually got me thinking. I said, can this be not the same example that Greece set 2,600 years ago, when you created the Amphictyony, or a league of neighbors of 12 tribes, and 12 tribes were neighbors basically. They were like states. Now we call it tribes. It used to be maybe states at that time. And how they came together. And I thought this could be a very good case study for us to be able to build a model council in the world, and which is why Janvi ji is a very effective and very, let me say, a very inspiring and influential partner in the process. Yes, Janvi, over to you.
Yeah, okay. Yes, Ramesh, you really said it all. But I would just like to add that we see in Delphic the whole, the way that you've talked about preserving cultures, being able to preserve intangible cultural heritage. All that was very, fascinating for us. And it's a very, we are on the sort of a cusp in history where we have to make sure that we are recording and promoting and preserving. So this is a good time that Delphic has come to us. And we have to make sure that we all act responsibly towards this and get this done. And I'm just happy to add here that when the first national anthem was being planned for Delphic, I reached out to our youngest member in the Northeast Council, the 4-year-old Esther from Mizoram, who sang the fantastic opening lines of the national anthem. And she's there with us, and as are the musicians. So like I've said, this area was earlier, the Northeast was identified for insurgencies some decades ago, no longer so. This is a land of peace, this is a land of music, cultures, immensely talented, immensely creative, and innovative people who've not had, now they're having the opportunity coming forward in this new, in the new sort of a paradise, unexplored. This area is now coming into its own light. And with Delphic, we have to make sure that each one of these disciplines that Delphic stands for, we know the Northeast fits into each of the categories. And we want to make sure that is our commitment to our people through Delphic, that we will. Thank you.
What an inspiring story. Both of you, your journeys have been tremendous in how you all have brought together this, and how you are taking it forward. Just before we go into seeing Janabi's video and what she's always been doing to protect culture, I'd like to understand how you both define culture and how you both define creativity in your regions, in your remit. In your remit, how do you define it?
So I would say that culture is your identity, is who you are, where you come from, what you speak, what you wear, what you eat, what your beliefs are, and what your strengths are in terms of the spiritual and holistic approach that you take as a community, as a whole, as a society. I think that's what defines you. That's what I would believe culture is. And therefore, it is very important to have our identities, because without our identities, we are nobody. It's like, a human being, absolutely, what you call that, undefined. So I think the refining of a human being is what culture is. Janvi.
Yeah, I would like to add here that it's very important that we also take pride in our own culture, in our roots, in our own cultural moorings. We don't need to be something that a developed, maybe the Western India is, or a more developed Southern India is. I keep telling our people that we are good as we are. People who come from across the world want to come and see what we are about. So when we talk about the world of travel that we belong to, and when we are given examples about, the 5-star properties or the Rajasthan hotels and the palaces, we need to get unnerved by anything. This is our simple, intrinsic, beautiful, green, verdant area, very rustic, very basic, but this is what we are about. So we don't need to change anything about what we do. It's our message that we send out in tourism, is that be yourself, be authentic, celebrate where you come from, celebrate your creativity, your own culture. That is exactly what I would say defines culture. It is the region you're born into, the terrain you belong to, the people you've grown up with, and the vernacular of, say, the weaving language that I celebrate, or the experiential tourism that we try to promote in our region. All that is also culture. And all that is what we ask of our people. Just be yourself, just be authentic. People across the world, this is what they want to come and see. And yes, we will do our best to promote what is best and beautiful and authentic. And we hope we can keep that. So that is the responsibility we have to our people.
That is something that you've always done. And on that note, Yash, I'd like you to share the video called Assam Promo, because that's what represents what Janabi and her family have been protecting, positioning, and showing to the world. Yash?
18 years ago, in the year 2003, Assam Bengal Navigation designed a unique nature-based proposition on the Brahmaputra River that is a high-value and low-volume tourism endeavor. The boutique portfolio of specially designed river ships, houseboats, and jungle lodges along the Brahmaputra and Ganges rivers. Growing up amidst the tea plantations and the national parks of Assam, with the majestic Brahmaputra River in our backyard, we were abundantly blessed to be surrounded by pristine nature and learn from indigenous tribal communities that thrived on their relationship with nature. Having learned from our personal travel experiences, we wanted to add value in our home ground so that our national parks, waterways, and people benefited from such an endeavor. We are a second-generation travel company that was born in Assam in Northeast India, which is lesser known in the tourism map and largely considered a remote part of India. Thus, we pioneered luxury river cruise expeditions in India along the two national waterways, the iconic Himalayan rivers. We connect with riverine communities who tell their stories to discerning travelers from around the world. We care deeply not only because it is home, but because the impact of our responsible tourism practices are positively felt by our 300 plus employees and the families they support, along with the riverine communities and the environment around us. We value a conscious luxury approach wherein we celebrate our distinct culture and nature that is brought to life by a local crew who involve both the rural riverine community and our guests to participate, benefit, and sustain. We aim to preserve and celebrate the cultural and natural heritage of the local communities through a sustainable opportunity creation that directly or indirectly supports their livelihoods. When creating our products, we approach each aspect from design to experience to the people you meet to the quality of service you receive with purpose, thoughtfulness, and careful consideration of its impact on the community. We embarked with our model of a local impact cycle that has since become our mission in every new nature-based tourism experience that we add to our portfolio. The ships and boats are built locally, and the decor on board is a contemporary reflection of the rich culture of Assam and Bengal, using antiques, handicrafts, and handlooms made entirely by local artisans. From building the furniture locally to training young naturalists, from engaging the local dance troupe to popularize indigenous folk dance and music, to celebrating the work of the local artisans and weavers, we have built a bond with the local village communities. We are a self-funded foundation in which every booked room of our portfolio contributes a percentage of the proceeds to support these causes. Additionally, through our work with ABN Foundation, we support special causes in education, environment, and community development. 2020 was not an easy year for us for obvious reasons, but yet we are adamant to support all of our crew, and we continue to do so in these troubled times. In 2021, we are creating an eco-retreat in Manas National Park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site that will benefit from a high-value, low-volume, nature-based project, which will be designed with lessons learned from our Safari Eco Lodge, the Diflu River Lodge in Kaziranga National Park, also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. We are also introducing another wooden houseboat for luxury river adventures that will enable access to the far tributaries of the Brahmaputra River. The very same boat will also be used to transport medical and food supplies to those affected in the annual Assam floods every monsoon. Furthermore, in creating local impact eco-lodges that imbibe the local aesthetic and include the community, we hope that others can see it as a replicable model for quality tourism development in Northeast India, so that we can preserve the natural and cultural beauty of our region in all its glory.
Bravo, Janabi. It's not just you. You've actually created a tradition of passing this on through your legacy. This is a living heritage. This is living treasure. And I can see your daughter is taking this mantle forward in a very brave and very focused manner. Coming back to both of you, okay? In a world, especially India, where even light and water is a luxury, how do you think you will get people involved in culture? Because at a time where we struggle to get onto a bus to go to work, or we have so many battles through a day, whether it's red tape for someone who's an entrepreneur, or it's just the maddening traffic for an everyday man. These are things that have, and also with now the forthcoming tension, one about safe travel and two about culture, about this whole narrative about culture that we're hearing. How do you plan on strengthening your narrative? How do you plan on sending your message of culture out? How do you plan on involving people at this given time when there's an economic downturn, there's an environmental threat, there is still the long lingering legacy of COVID? How now will you actually involve people in an inclusive manner to say, no, culture matters?
Anbiji, you take that first.
Well, I'd like to think we are optimists at heart. And, I would like to say that COVID and its aftermath has, I think, shown people that how to celebrate life in its own way, especially in the Northeast. Everyone has accepted, they've changed the way of life. I think they've largely slowed down a bit. I find a lot of young people who have come back to the Northeast, and they don't want to be in the concrete jungle any longer. They're happy to come back and bring their talents back here. As we speak, I have this talented young designer from NIFT who was working for years in Delhi, and she said I was suffocated there. She came here. Luckily, she found me through my store, Cognac and Lahe Looms, and tracked me down. And by then, I was also involved with the Ministry of Textiles in the Handloom Committee. And, through common friends, she got to know about us, and she's come and joined. And there's so many talented people coming back. So I think if culture is sort of a way of life, it's not something that is only performed on the stages or a platform or stage managed. It's very spontaneous, a very intrinsic part of our life. So nothing really is going to die down. I think we're very optimistic on that. COVID has come, it impacted us, it's gone. I think we've learned the lessons from it, and we are only taking positive lessons from it. Likewise in tourism. It's a positive story. People are now looking at India. They're looking at travel locally. They're looking at appreciating their own backyard. They're looking at supporting the local people and your local talents. They're happy to explore their own region instead of going off overseas every time. So I would say that on a positive note, that I think we're on the right track here.
I would just add to what Janabiji just said, is it's a way of life. And for us, identifying culture is not just what you see, the physical culture that you see. It's also the practiced culture that we follow. We are possibly the only platform in the world who have incorporated social arts as a art category. And social arts, I think, is the way forward, because social arts is what defines your culture really, in what you practice, your beliefs, your rituals, and everything else which is non-religious in nature, which is entirely natural in nature, which actually make you live your life in a good way. And of course, the languages that you speak and all of that. So already we are a living heritage. Now, let me also add here that the story of India of, say, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago was far different from the story of India today. We are today in a progressive state where I can assure you that many people, I mean, I can see the huge difference between 15 years and now, how people receive, ideas from India. And, a lot of Indians, for that matter, have proven that their cultures have helped them to rise and to go ahead in life and to even take positions of eminence, which otherwise was mostly reserved for the West, is primarily also because of the resilience that, most Indians possess, again, attributed to culture. So the point is, we are a living heritage. We are the oldest living civilization with the youngest population. And you'll be surprised that, unlike many other countries, people in India are far more spiritual. And I think that is one of the primary bases of keeping culture alive. So I would say that while we do have challenges, like any large country would have a challenge, we would have challenges with the basic infrastructure, but every single state in the country, and of course the governments, at the central level, are making all the efforts to try and see if the people can be included in the mainstream. So there are plenty of things that have happened. In fact, there's an interesting organization in this country called Niti Aayog, and this basically is a policy planning organization. And I can come to understand that they are actually addressing to all of these issues, I mean, very minutely and across the states. And I had a very interesting conversation with a would-be Delphian from Niti Aayog, and it was a very interesting conversation. And what I realized is that what we think of India as what is there out in the world as a kind of a set standard is completely changed. And therefore, I would be that because we are a living heritage, we do not need to worry about inducing culture. It's already there. All we need to do is build on that culture. I think my responsibility as the custodian of an international organization that looks at creating common floors is to keep offering platforms, which I think is the need of the day. When you keep offering platforms and mediums and forums, I think people have a reason why they will even evolve more, because no culture is static. Every culture is evolving. And therefore, when it comes to arts or cultures, give them the platform and the impetus to evolve and not be static. And I think that takes care of things. That's exactly what IDC wants to do.
Beautifully articulated, but you do one thing more, which I would love to talk about, which is how you've created the chapters of IDC in such a way that they are constantly showcasing the culture. That you haven't made it a once in the year or once every 2 years annual event of a cultural games. You've gone beyond that. Can you talk about that perspective, how you made that breakthrough, and how it has impacted, say, even take a state like Rajasthan, or what Janabiji is doing in the Northeast. So how has that whole thing about, no, we won't wait for a 5-year Delphic Olympiad or something, but we will create living heritage and living experiences, been a shift been your mind shift, and how have you come towards that, and what has been the impact?
So I'll answer this in a slightly different manner. in the past, when we were founded in 1994, it was assumed
Oh,
that
1 minute, Rameshi. No diplomacy here. Please take a bow. Both of you are two of my very modest speakers, so please take a bow here.
I will, and I will tell you as to the context basically. So when we started in 94, possibly at that time, the world was viewed as one country, one culture. You see, which is why when we had a League of Nations, you see, countries were representing their cultures. Now, when it comes to a country like India, even China for that matter, even, or, in South American countries and not many countries, where it's multiracial, multicultural, there are subcultures and all of that, you don't claim that, one country can represent all those cultures in one go. And which is the other thing was that when we started with the Delphic Games, the idea was to revive the ancient Delphic Games. Obviously, these are large, very large platforms. It takes 4 years to organize that. That's the way Olympics are organized. And therefore, I think thought might have possibly been applied, but at that point in time, you did not have the wherewithal. So therefore, you created countries. Now, one of the things that I realized as I started interacting with people is that human beings are, human beings need continuity. Human beings need inspiration. Human being need things on their face. It's out of sight is out of mind. When you practice something, you become perfect. So the idea, the gap in the 4 years that you had between one Delphic Games and the other Delphic Games, in that gap, what used to happen is many of the countries did not know how to go about it. Is because a handful of people who are representing a country cannot decide for all the entire country, especially for countries like ours, where you have multiple cultures. Even Germany, where we are headquartered, has 16 different provinces or regions, and each province or region is very different. Frankfurt would be different from, say, Bavaria. So the idea is, how can we then get those regions to come forward with their cultures? And which is why I thought of the idea that, while the Delphic Games would have gaps in between, let us continue to do activity, encourage every region to do their own regional activity and present themselves to the world so that people know that the world is just not what we believed in. The world is far deeper than this. And to make one whole, you need many parts. And I want those parts to be active, and which is the reason why the idea of regional councils doing continuous activity, therefore inspiring themselves and the people around them, and trying to also propagate the idea of culturists, culture practitioners, artists, people from the creative and cultural industries, and stakeholders who support the creative and cultural industries, and even people who love arts or people who love cultures to gather. And tell me who doesn't. At the end of the day, all of us have an identity. And therefore, even if we deny it, even if we think that, we don't want to be in that space, you still identify. You have to identify yourself as a nationality. There is no non-nationality in the world unless you are a refugee. And even refugees, they long for the land. They don't go back to the land because political reasons they can't go to the land. So I am making a very sharp statement here, is that people who think that they are global in nature first need to realize that their identity is what makes them global and not what global makes them local. So the idea is that if I am an Indian, my Indianness is what will take me to a platform where I can say that, yes, I'm in India, come with these values. Tell me what values do you have? Can we work together? If I don't have values of my own, what am I going to offer to others? And that's the reason why I think the idea of continuity and the idea of inspiring, idea of presenting stuff on a continuous basis is what we started. And I must tell you, Jahanavi ji and our colleagues in India who are heading different states, and we have a Delphic Games happening. It's like the first leg of the games happening in India in Rajasthan on the 9th to 12th of this month. And this is again for us a litmus test to also check how people respond and how people view this and how are we able to make them aware or communicate to them. So this is a result of continuous activity the state of Rajasthan has done. Therefore, they are able to do this in a better way because their sensitization, their understanding of the topic, of cultures, of arts, and getting the ecosystem together has been very effective. And I think that is the reason why we continue to do activities. And obviously, human beings love continuity. We all know that. And if we constantly keep talking, baat banne se baat, bolne se baat banti is a Hindi saying that, keep talking and, you're able to create magic. I mean, you're able to do a lot. So I think talking in this sense, in this context, could be engagements, could be, two-way engagements, one-way engagements, whatever, but we keep doing that. That's the whole idea. Janvi ji.
Yes, this is for Janvi now.
So that's why we're looking forward to what Rajasthan has to tell us. And what Shreya ji has done in her Rajasthan chapter is what all of us council heads are going to go visit Rajasthan ourselves. And it's not an easy task, but to be able to inspire everyone together is what we're all looking to understand and try to take back and do in our own regions. And I do think for us, especially in the Northeast, we are very lucky in the sense we have so many festivities on every month. And these are all the indigenous festivals common to our regions. They're not stage managed, they're spontaneous outbursts every time. All we have to do is try to get them together. What I had taken one idea that we have one English channel that covers, TV channel that covers all the 8 states. So I approached them and said that anytime they're like we had in Guwahati in Assam, we have the celebration of our patron saint. And for that particular month, we asked him to cover it. And he was very agreeable to it. So not only are we talking to our own people, our younger people, about this prayer meeting which took place, but every time there is something, say in Manipur or in Imphal, in the tribal area, the plains area, they would be covered on TV. And this will be celebrated, brought to the common notice, brought to its own people, and use that medium to also reach out to the Delphic world at large. So we are using all the mediums of expression we can in our own way. Speak to say maybe the radio station get this together, or the TV channels, or the writers, or the common forum. Like Ramesh has said, it's all around us. It's up to us how we take it forward. It's up to us how we can connect the dots and keep this, sort of tie up all these expressions which are happening. They're happening all the time. These bursts of creativity and culture are there all around us. We just need to map them and take it forward.
On that note, let me just talk about your revival efforts and how you've made the weaves really important and contemporary along with reviving them. So Yash, can you play out the video of Silken Synergy? And Ramesh, is there any other video you feel that we could play which would actually create a better understanding for the Delphic Games also?
Greece, the twin sister of Delphic Games, the twin sister of Olympic Games. That video.
Okay. So can we play it in that order, Yash? Can we first play Silken Synergy, have Janavi ji to give us a few thoughts on that, and then play out the Delphic Games sister of the Olympic Games? Both are working. Good.
So here we are in Kualkusi, the weaving village of Assam, called the Manchester of the East. Here, women are, for generations have been weaving. This is where Gandhiji has said that the women of Assam weave fairy tales in their looms. And since then to this day, weaving is very much part of the Assamese culture. And each household you go into Kualkusi, you will see what they do as a living, what they do as their culture is all around us. To people like Deepakn and others who have been doing this for generations. From his grandfather to his father, now to Deepak. This is a traditional lifestyle and a culture for our people. Now, of course, modern day, homes are going in for concrete flooring. But this is the best, he says. Whatever falls will not break and just be soaked by the earth. That is why it's the good earth of Assam. That Muga silk that you saw is now being woven into an Assamese. The two-piece that I'm wearing, the Mekhala Sador, or the full-length sari, is being created now by the women of our state. They're lifting all the designs by hand. So each flower, each design that's coming up is being created by hand. The threads are being placed manually. So it's not a mechanized system at all. They're far different from the power looms that you see. Government is trying to introduce power loom into Assam, but they are resisting that because then the employment generation will reduce. And then the beauty of the handloom is lost forever, which we in Assam have understood very well. And this are people like entrepreneurs, silk entrepreneurs like Deepak Kolita's family who have helped to keep this tradition. And the distinction between a power loom and a handloom cannot be overemphasized. The sheen that you see, there are two different kinds of sheen. One is on the Katiyama and one is the Jetuama. One is in April, May, and the other was in October, November. This is called the Ahimsa silk of Assam. And this was earlier the poor man silk. Every farmer, every poor man wore it. It was called the poor man silk. Now, people have understood the values and its thermal properties, comfortable in summer, warm in winter, and it's spun into the two-piece that I wear now, the Mekhla Chadar. It's spun into saris, shawls, everyday use. The same sheen, this is a reddish sheen, and this is the white sheen of the same AV silk. So the sheen, these are not dyed, these are natural colors. We are in Hualkusi, and this is the government Muga center, where they are rearing these trees are the home and the Hualu trees. He's come back fat and rounded in about 3 days. It'll be mature. And as you see, all the trees are wrapped in this side by plastic or anything. So they won't go beyond this. They know they're up till here. And then they will collect them to the next stage, which we will go and see now. From the silkworms that we saw on the trees, he has collected them before they fall on the ground, where that's why we had the covering on the tree. He's collected them. Only the beauty of this silk is that the pupa is removed before it's harvested. So there's no loss of life, which is why Gandhiji named it the non-violent silk, or the Ahimsa silk of Assam. This is also eaten by the tribal communities, or this is also food. So nothing is wasted. Grow from nature, raised from nature, and fed on nature. If we started with 2 employees, which was Ashish and me basically starting Jungle Travels, and then today over 200. And they all have the indirect benefits. The ones who work with us, their families, their communities, they're all growing along with us. And there's no way you can be, like what they say about being an island of prosperity in a sea of despair. That is not us. We have to take everyone with us. And that is why we feel so passionate about what we do.
What a heartwarming story, Janabi. There are a couple of things that came out starkly across for me. One is the contemporization of the culture, how you've taken all the roots, taken all the values, and then made it contemporary. And I find the same thing in Rameshji's approach. How do you take what is history, what is living heritage, and actually make it contemporary? And hence bring in a new narrative and bring in the youth into it. I'd love to know how you consciously do that, please, both of you.
I think Jahnavi ji would go first.
Okay. I'd like to first thank Sania for having me here. I was looking through your the summit objectives, and I find that the objectives of the RISE Infinity Foundation really has been to help create a more responsible, inclusive, sustainable, and eco-friendly society. And that so resonates with the values on which we built our company 3 decades ago. And I want to give a big thank you to Sania Kaplani, whom I had the good fortune to meet 10 years ago. And now to see the film that you made for us, that was also, and how you've touched upon what we stand for, the creativity and the culture that we were imbibing. And it's great that's all coming together, isn't it? And here we find ourselves on the Delphic platform, talking about this, which we were consciously doing, imbibing over the years, way before we met Delphic. So, and I would say for the weaving story that you've mentioned, that you've so kindly brought to light here, and thank you for it, is that the unique aspect is so women-driven. The handloom sector is the second largest employer in our country after agriculture, and women are the main focus in the Northeast. In the rest of India, it's the men who weave, and in Northeast, it's predominantly women. And I was just thinking how I got involved in the world of women weavers is when I became part of FICCI Flow. I was asked to set up the Northeast FICCI chapter, 2007. And I was looking for an activity which touches women's life, and there was handloom right there. And that's how my journey started. I found the human trafficking was an issue. And then I went to a shelter home for women, and I found a lot of empty looms there. There were women, there were looms, and there were no trainers. And that got me thinking, and the Central Silk Board came forward and helped me with a master trainer, a female master trainer, who stayed in the shelter homes and helped them for 2 years. And today I'm told by them that over the years, these women are now self-employed, or some of them are well-employed in other small entrepreneurs who have mushroomed up. And the good thing about the Assam is that people like to wear their own two-piece mekhla chadar that I showed on the film, that you showed on the film. So women are getting employed, they're wearing these clothes, and these women who we help to train have also found a livelihood. So it's a sustainable livelihood model, which we've always talked about, and I feel so passionately about, as is the tourism sector, also a sustainable livelihood model for women, but mainly women in the informal sector. So we need to talk more about them. We want to ensure that women are more monetized for it. So that's how when I started with my first weaver in 2007, which was also the time when I joined FICCI Flow, started the chapter here. And I used to ask her to go to the villages with better quality yarn, with better color combination that I would wear. And that's how she went back to the villages, and every month she would pay them for their produce and bring them back. I would help sell here. And we were employing, and we were giving livelihood at the rural doorsteps. So it was a win-win for both, until by 2014, I could formalize it a bit and could create my own sort of a shelter for women who used to weave, along with my wildlife lodge, which I must mention here, it's called the Diflu River Lodge. Very authentic, very, very basic, but very, it shows the tribal way of life, the missing village, right, on tourists. So that's another creativity and culture there for you. It's a standing testimony to what we are about. So with the Lahe looms, and Lahe means flow, is when we start this center. I'm happy to share is now flourishing and grown with women who also brought in their husbands, in fact, to work on our looms. They've come in with their families. So it's a growing, sort of a throbbing center of activity. And when the tourists come to visit Kaziranga National Park, they would also like to go and see the looms. And it's so important to be able to show them that these are the very basic, laborious, looms, hand looms that they actually work on and create this work of art. And why you must never bargain with the weaver because of that work that they do. So people must understand the difference of the handloom and handloom, which I keep talking about. So that's what Lahore Looms has been able to teach me, and I've learned, and being able to give back a little. And I think having understood the problems of the women weavers and the weavers at large of our community, of our region, I've been able to, put up the recommendation when I was in the handloom committee, and when the objective was about tripling exports, handloom exports. But I did find that my region, though we are the largest weaver households in the country, we have a very unfair playing field that we're working with too, antiquated equipment to be able to come up to that level. So those were things I've understood on the ground. I'm grateful for that opportunity. Put up the recommendation that's gone up in print to the government of India. And in our own way, we are all trying to do our bit. And I do feel that my responsibility has somehow grown from, I just don't think of it as a commercial enterprise that I'm weaving a sari or a mekhla chadar. But
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you've never ever thought of it as a commercial activity.
I've never occurred to me. And I feel more very strongly to talk about when people generically ask for Assam silk. And I keep saying there's no such thing as Assam silk. The silk which is out there is really Chinese silk. And all what is coming in from the mills of, I think, Andhra Pradesh with their, with the mill spun and the synthetic silk. That is not our silk at all. But we, in the region, is known for 4 silks distinct to our region. One is the Muga silk, which has a GI status on it. Then we have the Airi silk, the Mulberry silk, and the Tassar silk. So we should celebrate all the 4 silks very clearly. And so that's the story I'm happy to tell now. So I think more and more I've become a votary of that. So sort of from tourism, I've morphed into this. But again, that's art, that's culture, that's creativity for you. And I'm very happy to be able to do so.
Beautifully articulated again. And Rameshji, this is over to you. I think, would you like to play the video before you discuss this? Would you like
just
to
answer completely. Okay. I'll just like to add something. See, it's very easy to differentiate. You see, you asked a very specific question. So what is living and what is something which is, possibly that people like? There's something called optical, you see. People like the glamorous stuff and people like things which are shining, and, there's a normal human tendency to like them. But you see, substance usually is in things which people consider boring. But eventually, the base of everything you do, it comes from that substance. And I think there are serious practitioners in every society of all kinds of people. You see, you have got serious practitioners who really want the puritanism of things. And there are practitioners who want the opticality of things. So the point here is that it's not difficult to differentiate. So what we do from an IDC perspective is that we have 6 art categories, and each art category is very well defined. So each art category is a universe by itself. So therefore, it's not difficult to identify people from that universe. When you speak about music, you know who loves music and who loves singing and who loves, listening to it, who loves performing, who loves watching performing. You see, people who understand the intricacies is automatically you build it into it. And since it's the only platform where you have everything from music to architecture, and because it's transdisciplinary in nature, to us, honestly, it does not matter whether it's living or whether it is created, because everything gets juxtaposed to each other, and one does not live without the other. Unlike sports, unlike Olympics that you play, if you're a shot put player, you don't go and do javelin. You have 2 different techniques to play. But when Jahanavi speaks about, so passionately about Muga silk and the GI status, for example, then obviously there's a cultural backdrop to it. Also, there is a science to it. Science and a cultural backdrop and the ecology that supports the silk. Otherwise, you don't have those worms growing. You don't have the silk, pods happening. You don't have all of that. So eventually, from one to the other, You need to protect your nature and environment, which according to me is the first responsibility of any culture. And from where cultures emerged. So you look at the root of cultures in the world, it's always been river-based civilizations, or civilizations near water bodies, or civilizations in mountains, for example. And everything has evolved, even your tastes and the way you live and whatever. I mean, go to a mountainous region like Himachal Pradesh, or even perhaps parts of Northeast, and see how they live and what they do. It's totally built around their nature. And similarly, people who live in the plains. So primarily to me, everything is intermixed, transdisciplinary. So there is no difficulty in differentiation because you don't have to differentiate. It just moves on. That's the whole idea.
Truly interesting concept. Thank you. All good things have to come to end, and we're just very close to our end. But before we even go anywhere, I'd love to play out the video that says exactly explains how Delphic Games is the sister of the Olympic Games. And I'd like both of you all to speak about that right after the video. So Yash, can you play that video, please?
Once upon a time in ancient Greece, when body and mind lived in symbiosis, fire, used as a symbol for the Olympic Games, they were dedicated for the competition in sports. Water, used as a symbol for the Delphic Games, they were dedicated to arts and culture. Both took place for about 1,000 years until they became banned. In 1994, representatives of 20 countries founded the International Delphic Council in Berlin to start off the Delphic Games of the modern era. Since then, the IDC arranges for Delphic Games and Junior Delphic Games within a 4-year period.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Because they'll be exposed all over the world. I think it's good. It's great. I'm very excited.
Similar to the Olympic Games for sports, the Delphic Games unites people of all nations and cultures through the fascination for the arts.
There is definitely a definite parallel narrative that needs to be built, not just for creating a sense of identity and self-pride in ourselves, but also because I feel it's time that there is a inner consciousness, but there's also a collaborative wealth that is created. I would like to talk to you about how you see the Delphic Games stirring up livelihood generation for our culturists and our creators.
Yeah, so to answer that, from my perspective, I would represent the IDC perspective, is that when you talk about the global milieu of, creating common flows, so there are two things to it. One is, how do you directly benefit somebody by what Jahnavi ji is doing is a social enterprise. She's directly contributing to getting people engaged to doing stuff. We are talking about 6 art categories. We're talking about 120 or 130 subcategories or disciplines. We are talking about then there are even genres within those subcategories that you have. So you're talking about hundreds of categories and subcategories, and therefore, practically, it's not possible for you to address to every sector that you are engaged with. So what you do is, there can be the other side of it. One is actually engaging, which ideally the governments and social entrepreneurs do. And the other is galvanizing or creating the flows where people come together and then create a greater need for other people to, involve themselves and to help. So the idea is, when we talk about a common floor for arts and cultures per se, obviously we've evolved. Just like the Olympic Games came into the modern world in 128 years ago, we came 28 years ago. So one of the things that is a wish list, that is a part of our wish list, is to try and also now start infusing governmental and private aid to those people who come and participate in our common floors. And therefore, it could be any sector, any sector. It could even be something that you need to revive, something that's about to, say, perish, and you need to revive and bring it back to life. We would be more than happy to assist and evolve. And if somebody approaches us saying specifically that there is something that we could do with this, we will identify the right medium. So we would rather be the aggregators. We would rather be a common flow where people can come in and we can engage different people, rather than being the direct, what you call the giver of any sort of benefit, because we are not government, we are non-government. And therefore, we also live by the principle of cooperative federalism or cooperative management that we do. And therefore, in the cooperative management system, everybody contributes, and therefore you then build a larger force. So I think, to simply answer this, we'll be enablers. We'll be enablers for other, for artists to be able to plug in and try and use the larger ecosystem and resources and be a part of a larger movement where they can interconnect with each other. One of the things that we are doing now is to let members connect with each other at a personal level, right? So therefore, there are a lot of engagements that you could do between each other, and that is something that will really benefit. Because if you are an artist, or if you have a need for an artist, then you are able to connect, and therefore employment generation, livelihood generation, all that gets active. And then we can highlight these as a cultural lobby, a good ethical cultural lobby to governments around the world. And by the way, we also have something called the International Delphic Academy, and it is chaired by Dr. Christoph Quarisch, and from Germany. And this is something that is a spiritual and intellectual think tank of the organization. And this organization, this academy, also has a mandate to train people to be culturally sensitive. Half of your battle is won there. Because the moment you are able to train the government officials and other NGOs and people, the recipients as well as the givers, as to be cultural sensitive and to figure out what is the best for you, for your society, and to also advise on cultural policies that is non-existent in many countries. And even if they're existent in many countries, obviously it has not been, it's not taken into consideration today's, aspirations. And therefore we help them to evolve by giving them the right advice. So these are the things that we as IDC and IDA would be doing in the near future and in the coming future. Janavi.
Where this funding matter is concerned, we are looking for directions from the center and Ramesh, of course, in our own way. It's just been a very spontaneous way of working together and on a voluntary basis. It's a voluntary system, yeah. So we all put in whatever we can and bring it to the kitty. But I'm excited about, in our own way, what we do is the cross-cultural exchanges. We've had our poet from Sikkim being represented in Maharashtra. We've had our pianist from Nagaland interfacing in Delhi. And we've had our singer from Assam who's been engaged, I think, in Mumbai. She's had a cross-cultural exchange. We can see Kashmir University will probably be having a further discussion with Cotton University in Assam. So all those are happening as we speak, and it'll continue. So my job here, the commercials are a bit difficult for me to work on myself alone, but the connections between universities, between exchanges, between groups, they're happening at different levels. And I know we need to do more, and we will be getting there soon. But essentially, talk about, to do, to interface, to meet, and promote each other and get an opportunity to speak at forums such as yours, we'll get up there.
One last note.
Yeah.
The most important aspect of being a center point or an aggregator or a watering hole as we call it in a forest, to be the center of everything, is to digitize yourself. And I think we have lagged behind in that direction. And now we're planning to create a digital universe it's called the Delphic Digital Universe, which will encompass whatever we do in the latest kind of technology and the latest fashion, which will also comprise of everything from how we operate ourselves as administrative body, where we physically operate, the physical interface today. We want to digitize the entire thing. And therefore, while the human interventions are most important, human beings need not waste their time in doing, chores and things which possibly can be allotted to machines to do and to algorithms. And therefore, what then happens is you are geo-targeting very specifically, delivering very specifically, integrating with third-party applications, integrating with other organizations, using metaverse as your primary, what you call the tool to do things which otherwise would have not been humanly possible to do. And therefore, we will take advantage of what people also think is draconian in the future. People look at it as demonic in the future because it overpowers you. But I personally feel that any situation that happens in this world, if you can overpower it and if you can use it to your advantage, I think that works better. And I think IDC is heading towards a digital universe. And there have been a lot of conversations. By the way, Sanya ji, you lead the show. It's always been an inspiration to talk to you about tech, especially disruptive tech. Though we've spoken and then we've tried and understand things, because the voluntary organization takes a lot of time to build. But I think we know very clearly where we want to head, extremely clearly. And that is one area where I can assure everybody and anybody who would like to associate with us is a digital universe will be the aggregating point of creating even livelihoods without even us knowing about it.
I completely agree with you. And we see that happening all the time on our platform at the Unknown Planet, that where we have a constant go of people where the AI and the MLs do the interconnects. So I completely agree with you, though I personally think metaverse is a little ahead of its time. It'll take some time, but you're right. It's better to build today for tomorrow than to wait for tomorrow and then build yesterday. So, yeah. So I think on that note, it was wonderful hosting both of you. You have been really, really informative about the IDC. I think the people who are in this room are completely charged to be a part of the IDC, and definitely are looking forward to see how this shapes up on a day-to-day, on a human level. Having said that, I'm just going to recap what we spoke about. We spoke about how we could bring in culture and creativity, give it a competitive floor, a common floor, and therefore create collaborations not interregionally only, but also between consumer and the culturist or the creator. And on that note, am I right? Is that what we're all trying to do?
Very much.
Okay. And on that note, I have to say thank you and let Rise get on with their next speaker. Thank you very much for the attendees. I can see quite a few names. Thank you very much, Ramesh. Thank you very much, Janabi. And thank you, Yash, for always being there, for supporting us technically. It's always a pleasure speaking to both of you. It's wonderful to see the kind of work you're doing. Best of luck, and I hope to always be a part of that, even if it's in a shadow realm, but I'd love to be a part of what y'all are doing. Thank you so much. Ramesh, can you please drop a link in the chat interface or just tell us verbally, how can people get in touch with IDC?
Oh, yes. I'll just put in a link. We have a website called delphic.org, which is now being upgraded to being very interactive, and you can actually become a member through the website itself. And the other thing we have is we have Facebook handles and we have the general social media handles, which also we are upgrading, as I told you, Digital Universe. So that's a promise that we are going to keep. So we are going to enhance the visitor experience as well as member experience, as well as even if you just want to attend anything that we do, all of that becomes very easy. We are making the user friendliness extremely great. So yes, so delphic.org is our website. And each country would have their own, sites, and then you can just look them up. But the Facebook is called The Delphic Games. YouTube is called Delphic Games. Instagram is called Delphic Games. So I think you can just visit the Delphic Games handles and you should be good with us.
And Janabi, can you tell us about the cognac stores and Lahe Looms and how we can get in touch and see all the wonderful work you're doing there?
Well, I would say that we have, if you go into my website at www.ktigroup.co.in, you'll find all that we do in the tourism sector, and in the Lahe Looms, it'll be www.lahelooms.in. And I will send you the link as well if I could.
Thank you ever so much, both of you. It's been a pleasure hosting you and an honor. On that note, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Please take care. Thank you.
Namaste from India and hola to the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And goodbye to all.
Good night.